Start. Let's learn some Torah. Torah. Let's begin with the bracha. Thank you, Gil, in Eretz Israel. You getting it? I mean, it's a lot for you, Gil. I know you're like double working. You're working it. You're letting people in. You're getting the screen set up. Should we wait for you, or should we just jump into the bracha? What do you think?
Sorry, I'm like, hang on a second.
It's okay. We can,
There you go.
Okay. Toda raba. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu everybody. Eloheinu melech sheker shalom v'mitzvosa v'tzivanu asok divrei Torah. Amen. All right. Shema. We're going to look at chapter 37 closely of the book of Genesis. Paying close attention to a literary read, but also a little bit midrashically as well. And share the PDF should be in the chat, as well as the link to it for those who need the link. We have a number of different ways of doing this. So let's get there. Let me know if you see it. Thumbs up, everybody. Can you see it? Awesome. Good. Get this thing. And we're going to start. So at the beginning, as I said last night in my Dvar, that it's impossible to divorce I think it's impossible. I assert that it is impossible to understand the Joseph narrative without, of course, understanding Joseph's beginnings. And last night, when I spoke about the birth of Joseph, we don't often speak about the birth of Joseph. And I noticed something like last night, this morning, that I'd never seen before, which is obvious. It's kind of funny, the things you don't see, how many times I've read the story. So chapter 30, just to take a step back from chapter 37 to chapter 30, where Joseph first appears on the scene. And of course, the reason why Joseph is so important today is because chapter 37 is the beginning of the Joseph narrative, and Joseph's narrative will take us from 37 to 50. So the entire last 13 chapters of the book of Genesis are really the Joseph narrative. So chapter 30 is where Joseph first appears in the scene. Anybody want to read? Alan?
Hebrew?
Sure.
Vatar vateled ben vatomer asaf Elokim et cherpati. Do you want to do the English?
Or? Do the English.
I should. She conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. Vatikrat shemo Yosef lemor, Yosef Adonai li ben acher. So she named him Joseph, which is to say, may God, I'm sorry, that was a quotation mark, may God add another son for me. Vayihi kasher yalda Rachel et Yosef, vayomer Yaakov el Lavan, shalcheni ve'elcha el mekomi ula'artzi. After Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Lavan, give me leave to go back to my own homeland.
So a couple of things just to notice from this pretty amazing verse, right? So the verse is the Rachel says when she has become pregnant and she gives birth to a child, she said out loud, Asaf Elohim Cherpati. That God has, you can hear the word Asaf and Yosef, right? They're very connected, right? To add, but Asaf here doesn't mean to add, it means to gather in. Like Chag Asif, when we gather in, like Sukkot, it's called the gathering in holiday. So Asaf is to gather in. God has gathered in my cherpa, my shame. What is her shame, presumably?
Barrenness.
Her barrenness. So it's a funny phrase. What is God? Meaning God has taken it from me, right? God has like harvested I've grown a field of shame, and God has now harvested and taken it from me, as it were. And so you would think that that's the name of Joseph, because you're thinking that she's about to go to Yosef. But then the Torah gives us another name, a name. She gives him the name Yosef, which presumably is connected to shame, right? You can hear it, Yosef, Esof. But she says out loud, Yosef Adonai ben Acher. May God bring me another child. Now, both of those, it seems that both of those are instructive, and both of them have to do with the Joseph moment. His birth is significant, and for Rachel, it is his birth is a vindication or something, or a cleansing, or a release, or a relief. There's something about Joseph here that he's serving his mother's right cherpa, her shame. God has given me this, and now you lifted it for me. And then they add the name that is it's so intense. His name is Yosef Adonai Li Ben Acher, the God that may I have another one. Thank you, sir. May I have another? It's like a little bit weird, right? It's really intensely, existentially troubling, in a way that is, I think, very instructive. And then verse 25, which of course I'd never noticed before fully, that this becomes the moment. The Torah doesn't, it's not just alluded to, it's explicitly stated that the reason why Jacob feels it's time to go home to his Mekomi, to his place, which is also very powerful. Mekomi is the word for Jacob, right? When he first leaves his father's house, he's Vayivgaba Makom, he goes to the place Makom. He says, Vayikasher Yalda Rachel et Yosef, and it was when Rachel gives birth to Joseph that Yaakov says to Lavan, his father-in-law, Shalcheni, another very powerful word, another, like, let me go. I'll say that also with the angel, right, later on, Shalcheni, Ki Allah Amor HaShachar. The angel will say back to him, send me, because I have to go. Send me on my way. Joseph now, right, Joseph for Rachel and for Jacob it's as if the story has been waiting for Joseph to arrive for different purposes. One is that now Jacob feels that he's ready to go home for some reason. There's something about Joseph that is the beginning of Jacob's return home, or his homecoming. And for Rachel, it is also the signal of a shame lifted and a potential future being invoked. And the irony, of course, of all of this is that the very thing that Rachel wants, which is, may God give me another child, will become the proximate cause for her death. Right? Benjamin, the one who is alluded to here, may God give me another child, will be the one who is, right, that's the one who becomes the son of my pain, the son of my iniquity, in some way of rendering it. So there's a very powerful context for the Joseph narrative that doesn't begin in chapter 37, but rather begins already here at his birth moment. Just full stop there. So now let's look at Joseph and Jacob in the light of that. I want to come back to this. I hope we weave this back in. But let's look at Jacob and Joseph. For the first moment of the Jacob-Joseph narrative, the ominous beginning is chapter 37, verse 1. Vayeshev Yaakov, be'eretz migurei aviv, be'eretz Canaan. Jacob settled, Vayeshev Yaakov, he settles in the land of his father's, or his father's sojourning. The word magur is where you live. Lagur means where you, right? Geber Toshav, moving around, is a kind of itinerant, but he was living in the land of his father's sojournings, and then the Torah has to explicitly say that's the land of Canaan. So Migurei means the place where people have settled, but it also has another meaning, which is picked up on in the Midrashim and other places. What does Magar means? You see source number 3? Source number 3 is the place of being thrown or being hurled.
The root? What's the root?
So apparently in Magar, is the root to be thrown, like to be uprooted and to be thrown to some other place.
Rabbi, could you scroll so we could see that source?
Sure.
It would also connect to the name Hagar.
Right. Hagar is strangeness. So the way I translated above was in the land of his father's strangeness or estrangement. Like Jacob goes to live, and the Midrash picks up on this, in the land of his father's estrangements, which is the land of Canaan. In other words, the text on a simple meaning is just locating Jacob. But existentially, the text seems to be foreshadowing that many of the pains that Jacob might have thought he had avoided, right, are now about to revisit him. The chosenness piece. the one child being lifted up and preferred, the shame of Hagar and her child being estranged, and right, there's a way that in Jacob's life, Joseph will become the one who is Osef, who harvests, right, all of the shame of the family, not the shame of Rachel, but the shame of the family. That in Joseph there will be a possibility, like the drama of the gifted child, that there's a possibility for the full karmic resolution to take place through this child. But first, right, there's the pain of that all, and all of it has to come and be resurfaced. Right, there's a sense in this Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv be'eretz kanaan, that Jacob now, at least in the midrashic mind, is not settling. Right, we'll talk about this later in the open up, but Jacob, it's very ironic that the text opens by saying he's settling when anything but settling is about to happen. It's very unsettling in every imaginable way, and it leads the midrashim to say, like, oh, Jacob was looking for a place to rest. But Migurei Aviv, which also has the quality of fear in certain sources, like the fears of his dad, the fears of his mom, the fears of his ancestors, the fears of that which came before him, is now going to come back and be revisited to some extent. This is borne out very strongly in the very next verse. Ele Toldot Yaakov, and these are the generations of Jacob. Yosef, Ben 17 Shana. So these are the generations of Jacob, and you would think that it would go into the genealogy of Jacob. Like, isn't anybody else important here? Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Dan, Zevulun, right? Gad, Naphtali, Asher. Nope. Ele Toldot. These are the generations. This is the what's been born of Jacob is Joseph. The Joseph narrative is really born from within Jacob. And we have here also in a number of midrashic sources that Jacob and Joseph had a likeness, just like it says that Abraham and Isaac had a likeness. There's a likeness, a physical likeness, which is hard to imagine because Joseph is so beautiful, but really, and the Torah itself seems to compare him to Rachel. But there's something about Jacob's dreams and Joseph's dreams. There's something that is being played out through Joseph that is very much inside of Jacob. And in fact, it's impossible to understand the future of Jacob without understanding Joseph. The text is going to move from there into the word that becomes the most important word in the remaining 13 chapters, I think, one of the most important words, which is Echav, his brothers, because it's all about a return to the primal Cain and Abel story, right? So the primal Cain and Abel story is Haya ro'eh Echav batzon. He's like helping the children, he's shepherding the brothers who are like sheep or in the sheep, right? They were out in the field. And he is na'aring them, he's helping them, the children of Bilhah, the children of Zilpah, who are the wives of his father. And Joseph would bring their dibara'ah. He would bring their evil speech, or whatever it would be, the reports back to the father. Before we go on to verse 3, you already can sense here, by the way, that as Rabbi Claressis has pointed out to me, I think there's a connection here between being the word for shepherding, ro'eh, and for evil, ra'ah, right? It's the same word, same letters rather in the Hebrew, even if it's spelled differently and has a different root. It's played here, right? The word ro'eh in verse 2 and the word ra'ah in verse 2 are connected, right? There's something about the irony of a shepherd is one who doesn't let even one of the sheep go, right? The shepherd is the one who has to protect the sheep. And there's something here, there's something about the unprotected one. Joseph is the unprotected one, or they're the unprotected ones, right? How much of a shepherd is there present when no one is safe, right? The one who speaks isn't safe. The one who is, right, dreaming won't be safe. There's something here about the evil of the brothers, the evil of Joseph, right? That's being played off of here literarily. Does that make sense? So far, so good.
Interesting.
It's interesting, right? Yeah. So, what say you so far? What say you? So far, so good, right? So now we get to so on one level, what is this business with Joseph bringing the reports to the father? What is this? What is this business? Is he a tattletale? Is he a spy? What's in it for Joseph? And is this was Jacob behind it? Jacob was the one that told him to do it? Is there like what's the did he do it of his own accord? He said, "Okay, I'm going to be the one who stands in for with my father." What's up with the Joseph character here for a second? And then in the next piece,
And what were the bad reports?
and what were the bad reports, right?
What were they doing with those sheep? Did they do anything bad?
What could possibly be happening with the sheep?
Well,
And does anybody know anywhere else where in the Torah where dibara'ah is used, that phrase dibara'ah?
yes.
Where? Anybody? I just want everybody to know that I can't read any of the comments here. And anyway, so I'm not gonna make it to the comments. I can't see that far away. So does anyone know what dibara'ah where it comes in?
Yeah, Diba ala Aretz.
Diba Aretz.
Right.
The most famous story of Dibara'ah is the gossip in the story of the Meraglim, of the spies who were sent in by Moses, and they brought back a Dibara'ah ala Aretz. Sure. So we know that
Which was
intertextually
truthful. And everything they had said
it had
was
some
truthful.
true. It had some truth to it, right? Mostly true, right? So it could be, and it was still Ra. You can still be Dibara'ah.
It was the negative. It was focusing on the negative.
Right. Now, so Joseph is a spy like us, and he's bringing dibara'ah. But so in some sense, who gets the first? Who's the first volley that is thrown here? The brothers or Joseph? I just want to get this. Is it is the text setting up Joseph as, first of all, he's ro'eh et echav. So he's shepherding his brothers, right? So there's a sense here that he's the shepherd of the brothers, even though it says batson in the sheep, right? So there's a sense that he sees himself as a kind of a shepherd. Then it says v'hu na'ar et b'nei Bilav et b'nei Tzilba. He's like, whatever that means. Na'ar means to be young with them. It means to watch over them. It's also, he treated them as if they were younger than him, even though he was younger than them. Something about Joseph here and his character is being explored. And then he's the one who does the act, Vayaveh Yosef. And Joseph is the one that's bringing their dibara'ah to their father. So in verse 2, is Joseph, anybody happy about Joseph in verse 2?
He's a kid.
He's a kid.
happy.
He's just a kid.
Yeah.
Who feels
16,
something
17 maybe.
within himself.
What'd you say?
He's establishing a foundation for his own ejection from the tribe.
Ah,
Ooh.
okay, 1 second. I want to go there. Okay, great. So say it, Paul, say more about that.
He knows he has a greater destiny,
Joseph knows he has a great destiny.
but he doesn't know what it is, and he doesn't know how to proceed. He doesn't know how to remove himself from an existing familial relationship. It's hard to do that. And one very efficient way to do that is to create anger and resentment for someone else to do it for him, which is what happened.
That's passive aggression.
Or aggressive
Or
passiveness.
active aggression.
Yes, he needs to do something. He feels it hard. And this is a very good way of accomplishing a goal.
That's so interesting because it's like before your kid leaves home for college and they fight with you
They're
for
very
3 months
irritating, yeah.
before they go.
Yes.
So it's an unskillful way of saying, I am already separate from you, but I don't know how to do that myself.
Or
so can you
extremely
please help
skillful
me?
way.
Right. Or extremely skillful way. Well, why is it skillful? I mean, he winds up almost being killed. I think a more skillful way would be to find a way to express that without incurring fratricidal
He might not have
feelings.
seen his
I'm just saying.
sale into slavery, but he wanted to be rid. He needed someone to throw him out.
Oh, really? Okay, so I will take, I will acknowledge that yes, an unskillful, I will say an unhealthy adaptation of, I don't know how to separate myself is you do it for me. But ideally, right, that leads to what we see leading to. In other words, if this story is a cautionary tale, it would say that the place of the person who does feel themselves to be the drama, the gifted child, whatever it might be, or have a destiny that's separate, is to find a skillful way to keep the family intact while, or a healthy family system can allow children to individuate without having to expel them into the narrow place of death and alienation and exile. Maybe that's not possible. Maybe, Jung would have a field day with this. It's not really possible for it to happen without some remainder. But I hear it and I love it because I think it puts the shadow of Joseph into the light of his daemon, of his acorn seeking to be an oak. Like this is all a pattern that he's wanting to express, but he doesn't have, or the system doesn't have that. Jacob had to leave, or he was going to be killed by Esau. Joseph has to leave. Nobody really knows how to do that here in the story. I love it. Okay,
He's not starting up with all of his brothers.
Right.
Very narcissistic also.
It's narcissistic. Okay, so let's one second. Let's take I can't see who's in the which hands are up first. Margot, go ahead. And then we're gonna go on. Margot.
Good morning, good Shabbos. Well,
Good
Joseph is like his father, and his father was born insecure, grasping onto his older siblings' heel. And so Joseph is the second youngest, and he is insecure. He's grasping onto his older brother's heels. He's not messing with Leah's children because she's the older wife. He's the younger son of the younger wife. And there's no reason for him to be insecure because he's his father's favorite, but he plays these games anyway. And I'm wondering if Na'ar could be a play on Ra'ah from just the Nephil. He's being bad. I know it's reversed the Resh and the Ayin.
It could be. I mean, I think that in later traditions, like there's something about Joseph's Na'arut being a Na'ar, Na'ariti Gam Zakanti. There's something about Joseph's Na'ar that is read positively, but certainly, yeah. I mean, in the context of the verse, it's not clear, by the way, if he's only bringing back Dibara'ah from the Bnei Bilhah and Bnei Zilpah. It could be about all of them. Certainly, all of them seem to hate him, but certainly you're right. I love reading this as a tale of narcissism and of, as I said last night, Joseph being named for not enoughness is a very instructive piece. He is certainly making every effort in these verses to be more, right? More than. So let's move a little bit in here. And now the text seems to move into another source of why the brothers hate him, and it switches from Jacob into Yisrael. The name of Jacob is no longer Jacob; it is Israel. Yisrael havid Yosef mikol banav ki ven zikunim hulo v'asa lo kiton pasim. And Jacob now loves Yisrael loves Joseph mikol banav. The text has to go out of its way to tell us mikol banav more than the other children, which in later Zoharic literature means from mikol banav isn't more than, but from all of the children. He thought he saw in Joseph the fulfillment that was in all the other children, but then the text says because he was a child of his zikuna, of his old age, which the Al-Sheikh says that's funny. I thought Benjamin was a ben zikunim, but okay, let's say that he is a ben zikunim. The asalo kiton basim, he makes for him a special coat. Now, the brothers saw that their father, which is so poignant, and for he was beloved to their father more than they were, more than all the brothers. And they hated him. It doesn't say that they hated him before when he brought the Dibara'ah. But if they thought that their father looked differently at them because of Joseph, and that he gave them preferential treatment, and they couldn't speak to him in peace. They couldn't be friendly to him. Now that word shalom will come back very powerfully in the next scene, in the next two scenes. So we have here almost a replication of the Cain and Abel story writ large, which is very much, as I've said here in the shul many times, in the name of my friend Sharon Brous, Rabbi Sharon Brous, that is the question that hangs over the entire book of Genesis is Hashomer Achi Anochi, am I my brother's keeper? And it comes back very forcefully, literally in a moment, because you'll see the word Shomer come back very powerfully, and God, of course, doesn't answer the question that from the mouth of Cain, right? Cain says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And God decides not to answer that, which of course would have been nice if God would have said, "You want to know? Don't you know? Of course, you are your brother's keeper." But here, clearly, the story is indicating to us that there is something around this that has to be completed. The next scene, verse 5, Vayichalom Yosef Chalom, Vayaged le'achav. In the very next moment, right, the text has already ratcheted up the hatred. The word hatred here, by the way, when does hatred appear earlier? When's the last time the word hate appears before the Joseph narrative? When
Rachel and Leah.
Rachel and Leah. Exactly.
Chidon Tanakh.
Yeah.
That's important, no?
Yeah.
What is it?
Exactly. The last time the text tells us someone was hated, it was Leah. She was hated. Now Joseph gets to feel what Leah and her children felt.
Nice.
Joseph now will feel what it feels like to be hated. Leah felt hated, right? Leah felt kisnu'ah anochi. She was hated, right? And that's the way the brothers felt. In the story of Dinah, the brother said, "Achazonaya achotenu." Are we supposed to be second-class citizens? What happens to us? What happens to Dinah? It's not okay. And now Joseph feels that hatred of being not seen or not loved, but it doesn't stop him, which is an amazing thing. You would imagine that he felt hated. And it doesn't say that he felt hated, but it says they couldn't speak him a good word. Now, if somebody's not speaking you a good word, is that the time to go and tell them your dreams that you're better than them? It's like a remarkable obtuseness on the part of Joseph's character.
Unless you're Paul's theory.
Unless Paul's theory is true, like he's really gonna double down. He's like, "You hate me? Sure, I'll make it even worse." Like,
Yeah.
and by the way, it's not uncommon. Like I don't,
Yeah.
I have this one of my kids. I know this in my own person in my life when I was a younger kid. If I felt like I wasn't loved by the people around me, I would try to impress them. It was an adaptive strategy. So like, oh, now they'll love me, and I'll come and I'll give them this really great story. I'll come up with my false self, right? Like now they'll like me, and it usually works the opposite direction, right? It's like they don't really like it. They think you're impressive until they think you're not, and you're hiding behind it. So now he comes. He's got his dreams, and Vayichalom Yosef Chalom Vayaged le'achav, and he tells it to his brothers, which is like amazing. The word echav. Vayosifu od snotu. And now the text will say they hated him even more, but the word for more is Yosef. So there's more. Their hatred for him is rooted in his Josephness, like I gotta be moreness. Vayomer alehem shimuna, which is also great. Please listen. Which is it please listen or you must listen? What do you think it is? Like please listen or you have to listen? I had this dream.
Seems like a command.
Somewhere in the
It
middle.
seems like a command, right?
Yeah.
Shim'una, listen.
Yeah.
Listen up. Hachalom hazeh shechalamti. Verse 7. V'nei, behold, we are anachnu me'almim alumim b'toch hasadeh. We are binding sheaves in the middle of the field. V'nei kama alumati v'gam nitzava. And my sheaf, stood up and was upright. V'hinei tisu ben alumutechem. And your sheaves bow down before me, and and they gathered around, and then they bowed low to my sheaf. They said to him, "Echav." It has to keep saying "Echav." Hamaloch timloch aleinu. Look who's Mr. King. You're going to be a master of us. Imashol timshol banu. You'll now rule over us. And then vayosifu. Oh, they Joseph more. Oh, they hated him even more. Al chalamotav. For his dreams and al divarav. That's also why. What are the divarav? Vayichalom od chalom acher. Verse 9. and he had another ode. Like everything in Joseph's life is one more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He has not just one dream, he has to have another dream. Right? Vayesaper oto lecha vayomer hinei chalamti chalam od. He says, I have another dream, another ode. The ode, by the way, appears like 90 times in the Joseph 13 chapters. Ode, one more, one more, one more. Ode.
Rabbi, scroll down, please.
Thank you.
But the father never takes responsibility for making,
Yeah,
for
well,
what he did
That's true.
to
He didn't
make
have,
him this
I know
way.
Freud had not come up on the scene yet. It wasn't, we
Well,
we
remember,
haven't gotten our way to Freud and Alice Miller and the Chevra. Okay, so 1 second. It says, Vayachalom od. And, we know the Shemesh, Yereach, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars are bowing to me.
Yeah.
Vayisaper, verse 10. He tells his father, but he's already told it to the brothers, and now he goes back and tells it to the father and to the brothers. So now twice to the brothers, once to the father, in verse 10. Vayikarbo, and he's sounds like Migurei Aviv, Vayikarbo, he gets angry at him. Vayomer lo, Ma chalom hazeh shechalamta, what kind of dream is this that you dreamt? Havo navo, are we going to come, me, your mom, your brothers, to bow down before you on the ground? Like Anu bo echav, and his brothers were jealous of him. It's the first time, right, that says that they're jealous, which is maybe a higher level than just hating him. Like Anu bo echav, his brothers were jealous of him. The aviv shamar et hadavar, and his father watched over this matter. Now, when you see the word shamar, and you're it's hard not to take the word shamar here and go back to hashomer, right? Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper? The word shamar is to watch over, and in many ways, by the way, in Jewish later biblical text, a shomer is a protector, or somebody who is a guardian who watches over objects, right? If you give somebody an object and say, "Can you watch over this until I come back?" It's called a shomer, right? It's like, right, somebody who does shmirah is protecting something. Mm-hmm. So his father is protecting the davar, but it's a bit ironic because in a moment he's not protecting anything, maybe, right? So he's shamar the davar. If you look at Rashi in source 6, what does it mean to watch over it? He is shomer means hayam mamtin v'mitzapeh matay yavo. He was kind of shamar means he was biding his time. He was watching over it. Chen shomer munim. Like you use these quotes from the rest of the Bible, what it means to watch over. What does that mean? It means that he was watching the matter, meaning he kept it close to see what would come of it. But really, Matay Yavo means when it would come to pass, like he knew that it was inevitable. That's a really terrible,
So he wasn't going to intervene.
He wasn't
just
going to
watching.
intervene. He was withholding. He was watching it from a distance, but he wasn't, as you were saying, he wasn't doing anything to make sure that it didn't happen. So in many ways, Jacob now comes onto the scene. So now we have kind of the etiology of fratricide. We have Joseph as someone either actively engaging, trying to oust himself from the family system, or Joseph unskillfully acting out his narcissism by inviting his brothers to be his mother and to give him the things he couldn't get himself, or playing out his mother's shame and his father's his pain, whatever it might be. We have him sharing, it seems like without any sense of awareness, either in Paul's theory with a lot of awareness, but not able to do it, or in a more unconscious way, playing out, wanting this audience, shimuna. He's like, listen up, and not even taking it in. And then we have Jacob showing up on the scene now, and Jacob rebuking him in front of the brothers. Is it what's Jacob's role here? Rebuking them in front of the brothers? Is it to say, I'm not a part of this, but really he was waiting for it to happen, meaning he was waiting for Joseph to become the leader, or he's waiting for it to unfold? What's happening here? Jacob is implicated here in a weird way. What do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that this is how Jacob was raised by his mother, to be secretive, to play a trick on his own father. So this is what Jacob brings to this story, is he was raised in the same way. He was raised to feel that he was the favorite, that he was deserving of more, that he was going to inherit and get the birthright in the future and everything. So it's natural for Jacob to pass this down to one of his sons. That's how he was raised.
Meaning not just him, but also his brother was favored by his father. Isaac,
And his
right?
brother was favored, but
Right.
but he himself has now taken the position that he deserves this position. He
Right.
deserves Jacob, and he sees that this Joseph is the one who's going to continue that, to take that into the
It's
future.
funny it's interesting the way you hear where you're saying it. Wow. So he's, in other words, this is the way I grew up, and it's not a bad thing, and he's just
Yeah,
waiting for
and I
someone to be
deserve it.
preferred. And
Right.
you could
And
also read
Joseph
it,
deserves this.
A younger child being preferred.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
the younger child, the youngest.
One of-
A younger.
Except that in the Yaakov Esav story, there was intervention to make the thing happen.
Right.
And here he's just saying, let me see what happens.
Another way to read, like he could be passively saying, let's see what happens. I'm not going to get involved because I saw what happened when I got involved, when my mother got involved. So let me pull out and not get involved. Maybe it'll just run its course in a natural way. It could also be a little bit more, I think, for me personally, what you're saying brings up other things, which is the sense of almost a kind of passive inevitability of karmic past revisiting itself. And he was waiting. It's like, I did all the work I could do, but you know what? There was no way to avoid some of it being passed forward. So I'm just going to see what happens. It's going to happen. I didn't clean it all up. It's like, I went through my stage, I went through Laban and everything, but something is about to happen, and I'll watch it. But it's also, there's something, I love what you said. It's very, again, it's Jacob's used to it. It's what he knows. It's what he knows. Yeah, we're going to take one person online, and then I can't see who's in the.
Alana, Jill.
Jill. Jill, go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I am not driving. I've parked and I'm on my way to synagogue, just for the record. So anyway, yeah, I just want to shake things up a little bit, because I see kind of all the problems that you're pointing out as kind of a fixing, because the order of the day back then was that the older automatically gets all of these privileges. And so the Torah is fixing that by having the younger trump that. And it's kind of revolutionary for that time, because things were very automatic in that way. So I don't see, and I kind of see, I don't necessarily assign nefarious, ideas to Yosef, because he was just excited. I mean, anyway, the way I see it is maybe he was just excited to share this dream. God gave it to him, and
right. So that's the Jill. That's the classic read is that in I think in Genesis, that primogeniture, like the notion that the eldest child will receive a double portion or whatever it is has already been undone by Isaac, and then also by Jacob. And so Joseph is just like I don't think that this narrative is coming to teach us that the youngest son, like if we needed that teaching, that would come from earlier already. At this point in the Genesis narratives, it's almost a given that it's not the eldest son that's going to be receiving the birthright. That's already, like, the Joseph narrative is not new in that way. But I think that we'll see by the end that, right, it's certainly the case that the Torah tells us the eldest child is not always the leader. Like Reuven is not going to be the leader, Yehuda will be the leader, Joseph will be the lead, so that's there already. But I think that the second point you're making about usually the way that we read this story is a story of someone who's like, we usually fault the brothers here, and they have a lot to be blamed for, there's no doubt. And I almost feel like in this read, I almost don't want to blame anybody. Like, I don't know, like Joseph has a need to tell his dreams. It might not be coming out in the smartest way, but it might be rooted in a pathology that is much bigger than Joseph and his brothers. And that's the text is trying to say that they're all playing out their parts here in trying to bring this story to a healthy resolution on some level. That's great. Thank you, Jill. Let's go to source number 7. And so now this is really where things get really funky. And so the brothers go to shepherd the flock of their father in Shechem. And as soon as you see this, you're like, oh my goodness, right? what is possibly happening in Shechem? Like, what good things have ever happened in Shechem? Like, the text is like, you don't even have to like reread it. You don't even have to know, the text is, the brothers are going to Shechem. What are they doing in Shechem? The last time they were in Shechem, murder happened. The last time there was in Shechem, a rape happened. The last time they were in Shechem, the children of Leah, rose up and justifiably were enraged with their father Jacob for being a preferential father who was willing to allow Dinah, to be unprotected. Like the last time someone went to Shechem, it was Dinah, the daughter of Leah, who herself was unprotected, and something happened to her, right? So at least from intertextually, not midrashally, intertextually, the text is signaling something bad is brewing here. And Vayomer Yisrael, now we're back to Yisrael, and he says to Joseph, Halo achecha ro'im b'Shechem? Aren't your brothers evil in Shechem, as Rabbi Koreses would say, ro'im or ra'im b'Shechem? Haven't they acted in an evil way in Shechem? Now, lecha va'eshlechacha alehem. That's crazy. Let me send you to them. And Joseph says, Vayomer lo, and this is ominous, hineni. And right, the last time a father said to his son, I'm going somewhere, and the child said hineni was in chapter 22 of the book of Genesis in the Akedah, where Isaac says, yeah, sure, Abba, I'll be the sacrificial lamb. So is Jacob now sending Joseph as a sacrifice? Or is Jacob intuiting that something vital might happen here as a healing moment, a catharsis between the brothers and the end of the karmic pain, as it were, in the family?
I like the translation, I am ready, as opposed to
I'm here.
I'm here.
Right. Now it's like too much.
I know.
He says to him, go check out the peace of your brothers and the peace of the sheep. V'hashiveni davar, and bring me back a word. So, like, we're in 14 verses of intertextual subtlety and beauty. Vayeshev Yaakov begins with to settle, but also to return. Lahashiv is to return something. And so here he wants him to return a matter. Lahashiv davar, right? V'aviv shamar et hadavar. Bring me back. I want you to be the one who ultimately will bring me the answer to the riddle of how this thing will unfold. Vayishlacheu me'emek Chevron, and he sends him from the depths or the valley of Chevron, vayavo Shechema. Right, he sends him from the valley of the word Chevron, the place in Chevron. Chevron is where Abraham is buried, right?
And Shechem is where Yosef is buried.
Exactly. And so this whole scene is just an ominous setup for this next moment. Now, of course, Joseph now is all by himself, just like Jacob was all by himself. This is the first time we see Joseph by himself, and he's being sent by his father, almost like on a vision quest. He sent him out into the dark forest. And he's all by himself, and now this word, Vayim Tsa'eu, and he's found. Right? He's found by a man, and he's wandering. Just think about this image. He's completely, he doesn't know where to go. He's lost. Joseph is already lost, like a little sheep that's been lost.
And to'er rhymes with to'er.
To'ez, yeah, exactly. To'eh basadeh. Vayishaleo ish lemor mativakesh. And the ish, now we're totally back in the ish of the wrestling match in chapter 32. So we know this is a vital moment in Joseph's character. Like, this is for Joseph the moment, just like it was for Israel, where he becomes Israel. Joseph now will be, his destiny is being sealed. And he's being found, right? Vayintza'eu ish. And he says to him, Ma tivakesh, what are you seeking? Vayomer et achai anochi mivakesh. One of the most famous phrases in Torah, I'm seeking my brothers. Hagida na li efohim ro'im. Can you please tell me where they are shepherding? Vayomer ish nas'u mizeh ki shamati omrim. They left this place. I heard them, Shamati Omrim, I heard them, Nilcha Dotaina. Let's go to Dotan. And Joseph ran after his brothers, he went after them. And now he finds them in Dotan. What's happening here? Let's get some folks. Anybody on what we're talking about? Jay, on this? No. Okay. Anybody on this? Anybody?
Well, it's like a course correction.
It's like a course correction. It's a course correction or a course misdirection?
Depends if you see this as a healing or as a, to your earlier point. Is this sacrifice or a healing?
Or both.
It's like a horror movie.
It is a horror movie.
It is a horror movie because horror movies are very regimented.
Something bad's about to happen.
Yeah, and
you can hear the music.
Yeah, exactly.
The music is like
right.
Yeah, it's like exactly. Right, exactly.
And he's almost out of it. He's lost. He's not going to make it there.
But horror
then this
movies don't
mysterious
end well.
man tells him where to go.
This ends
It's very powerful though because he has none of the comfort. He has none. Like Joseph has none of the props that would allow him. He has no power. He's been completely right. He's outside of his context, and he's to'eh basadeh. He's completely, and he's on the way to Shechem, and he misses the moment at Shechem. Now, if Shechem is a bad place, missing the moment at Shechem would be a good thing. But the fact is that maybe this text is subtly saying that had he found them in Shechem, maybe that would have been a good thing. Or maybe the Shechem moment passed. Like the text is so powerful, like he misses the moment. And in some ways, the entire story is about missed meetings or missed moments, or the reading of one another and not finding one another. Now, the next verse is really then the setup for what's happening. And they see him from a distance, right? They see him from a distance. And he sees them from a distance, and before he even got there, they see him from a distance, which says everything, right? They see him from afar, and before he could get close to them, which means they wouldn't allow themselves to feel the familiarity or the intimacy, the brotherhood. They see him. He's no longer their brother. He see him. And they say one to their brother, Hinei bala chalamot hazeh ba. They don't say, here comes our brother. They say, here comes that guy whose dreams make us feel jealous. V'ata lechu v'nargeu. Let's now murder him. V'nashlicheu be'echad haborot. And we'll just throw him into one of these pits. And we'll say, v'amarnu, chaya ra'ah chalatu. A chaya ra'ah, an evil beast. Now, why chaya ra'ah? Why not just say chaya? Like chaya ra'ah. Again, back to this word, ra'ah.
Because they're the evil
They're the evil beasts. They're the ro'im. They're the ones. They're chaya ra'ah. Right? It has eaten him. And we'll see, and now we'll see what will be with his dreams. Now, Vayishma Reuven. And now, Jill's point, the eldest child hears this. Vayatzileim Yudam, and he saves them from his hands, which is amazing because he doesn't. He says, though, Vayomer lo nakenu nafesh. Let us not kill him. Vayomer alehem, he says to them, in verse 22, Reuven. Al tishbechu dam, let us not spill blood. Cain and Abel is right here, because that's the phrase in Cain and Abel. Hashlicha oto labor hazeh, right? In other words, we can do the first part of what you said we should do, we're not going to do. In other words, Reuven wants to save his life, but he essentially just says the second part will save his life. But it wouldn't, right? To throw him to one of the pits would also be to kill him. But okay, fine. He's going to throw him to one of the pits. V'yad al tishlechu bo, let's not actively kill him. But then the text now in the end of verse 22 will say to the reader, what was his intention? Laman hatzilo to miyadam lashivo el aviv. He wanted to save him from their hands, to return him, vayeshev lashivo, to bring him back, to return the lost object to his father. So that was Reuven's plan. It doesn't say if they agreed with him. It doesn't say that they said, "Oh, good idea." Vayikasher ba Yosef el achav, and when Joseph came to the brothers, vayavshitu et Yosef kutanto, and when he came to them, it says very powerfully that he comes to his brothers. Right? He still sees them as his brothers, right? But they don't see him as his brother, as their brother. And they strip Joseph of his coat, the coat that had been given to him by his father, like that coat. They make him naked. It'll be the first of 3 times that Joseph will be stripped. And they take him and they listen to Reuven's advice. They don't kill him, and they throw him into one of the pits. And then the text tells us ve'abor reik, and the pit is empty, ein bo mayim, and has no water in it. Which means what?
He's gonna die.
He's gonna die, right? This is like Reuven's plan is a silly plan. Like he is, he's gonna be in the pit. He's not gonna die immediately because there's no water in there, so he won't drown. Right? It's reik, it's empty, and there is no water in it, so he's not gonna drown. But his thirst won't be slaked, and he will die from a horrible death. And now they sit down to have a meal, while their brother presumably is screaming and crying within earshot. We're in verse, we're in
25.
Verse 25. They sit down to eat bread, and they lift up their eyes, and they see an Orchat Ishmaelim, like a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilad. Where was Gilad in the text? I'm sorry, Chidana Tanakh, but what was Gilad? Anybody remember 2 parshas ago? Gilad was where Laban and Jacob had made a covenant to be brotherly with one another. And the Gilad means this mound will be a witness to our relationship. And so these Ishmaelim are coming from a place where there was an agreement to be peaceful with one another.
They're cousins.
They're cousins, right? And by the way, it's not insignificant to invoke Ishmael at this moment, the one who was sent out into the desert and for whom there was no water, and whose mother Hagar was the thirst was right, who might have died from thirst. She couldn't even look at him, right? And now these Ishmaelim are coming, and they have all of the stuff. They have presumably all of the trade route. They have gum and balm, and they're going to go down to Egypt. And now Judah arises. Vayomer Yehuda, the 4th child of the family, the 4th, but the most important in the story. And he says to his brothers, Ma betza ki naroget achinu, v'chisinu damo. What good will it come from us to kill our brother and to cover up his blood? Now, they're not about to. So, like, what's Yehuda saying? Reuven already said we're not going to spill his blood, but isn't Judah saying something else? He's saying, what's the difference between killing him with, and spilling his blood and covering his blood by keeping him in the pit, right? So clearly, at this point, either Judah hasn't got the memo that they're not going to do what they thought they were going to do, or maybe Reuven was not efficacious in his argument. Reuven was not a leader. And so Judah stands up and he says, let's get up and sell him to the Ishmaelim. Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. And and let our hand not touch him. Why? And this is vital. This is vital. Ki achinu b'sarenuhu. He is our brother and our flesh. And then this last coda, which I skip every year, I can't believe it. Vayishma'u echav, and his brothers listened. It doesn't say that with Reuven that the brothers listened. There was something in Judah that was able to get the brothers to hear him. Right? The brothers can't hear the dreams of Joseph. They can't hear their father. But Judah has a way of persuading his brothers. Now the text doesn't say that they do anything. Vayavru anashim midyanim, and now instead of Ishmaelites, the Midyanim come. It's very confusing here. They socharim, they're merchants, and they sell, right? They sell Joseph. They take him out of the pit, and they sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. Be'esrim kasef for 20 pieces of silver. Vayaviu Yosef Mitzrayim, and Joseph has now been taken down to Egypt. The brothers, in the end, have nothing to do, at least in the simple meaning of the text. They all scheme, and while they're scheming, a bunch of Midianites come in and do what they were going to do, and they sell Joseph. And so from this point, at the end of verse 28, we actually don't know. The brothers return to the pit, not just Reuven, but all of them must be wondering what happened to Joseph, right? Verse 29, Vayashav Reuven el Habor, and Reuven comes back to the pit, V'hinei ein Yosef Habor, and Joseph is not in the pit. Vayikrad b'gadav, and he tears his garment. Vayashav el achav vayomar hayeled einenu v'ani ana aniva. This is remarkable. The child is not, just like this is very Rebecca-esque, right? And this cry of existential woe, Anna, how can what am I going to do? Now, at this point, by the way, for the brothers, they think Joseph must have been killed or stolen, right? Presumably. While they were eating
don't they know that they sold it? Some of the brothers do and some don't, right?
No, at least in the simple meaning of the text, the brothers should have no understanding of what happened to their brother.
Who sold Joseph for 20 pieces of
The
silver?
Midianites.
The Midianites.
Okay, got it. Okay, sorry.
So at this point, the brothers are shocked. How could it be? We were going to, we were going to sell him and know that he was being sold, but it'd be alive. But now we have no idea.
Why Midianites?
No, no idea why Midian. It brings Moses into the story.
Yeah.
Later on, brings a little, Joseph, and I think in some way, Moses and his relationship with Yitro will be like a tikkun of many things. Maybe, I don't know. It's a great question. And here, like, what's so evocative here this year is like they were sitting down to eat bread, and while they were eating bread, thinking they had the time to make things happen, it was taken from them.
How could they not have seen a caravan of Midianites and a
Busy with the
caravan of
bread.
Ishmaelites going
Busy.
by? They,
Stuff
I
with
know
their
they went to
faces.
eat.
They were stuck.
They would. They.
It's gotten dark.
They did see Yosef coming from far,
That was really
right? They were able to see, and they recognized him.
Vayechu et kitonet Yosef vayishchatu sirizim. They take the garment of Joseph and they slaughter a seir, like a kid, a goat, a male goat. Vayitbalu et kitonet badam, and now they dip it into blood. I'm not sure. Is this mezuzah? Is this the sacri? Is this the seir that it's an aisle over there in chapter 22? It's a ram, and here it's a seir. It's very interesting. And they send this garment, taking it to and they bring it to their father. And they said, "We found this." Remember the word matzanu, that the person found him. This kind of these things that are found. We found this garment. Hakerna, please see this. Is it the ketonet of your son or not? Not our brother, but your son. another subtle dig at their dad. Like, this is your son, right? Your son, not our brother, but your son. Or more powerfully, this is what brought it to this, right? It's because he was your son and we weren't, that it came to this.
And the tunic that Joseph received from his father, but not anyone else.
Right, it's this garment. Vayakira, and he recognized it. This word also become another one of the 5 or 10 of these amazing words, because lahakir, to recognize, is to see. And they, of course, later on, the brothers will not recognize Joseph, but he will recognize them.
And Yitzchak didn't recognize.
And Yitzchak didn't recognize exactly Jacob. Vayomer kitonet bini, it is. Chaya ra'ah chalatu, and then he comes to his own conclusion, and he calls it a chaya ra'ah, a chalatu. Says it's an evil beast, meaning you guys. Tarov Torav Yosef. Yosef has been torn to pieces, which of course it means a treifa. What's a treifa? It's like it's treif. Something unkosher has happened here, right? Something unkosher has happened, right? You can't eat treif. You're not allowed to ingest treif. That which has been torn can't be ingested. And my family now is been torn apart. My whole family is treif. My whole life is. I'm completely dismembered at this moment, says Yaakov. Right? There's a treifa here, and it's something. It's horrible. Vayikra Yaakov simlotav. And by the way, it's also reminiscent of the Egla Arufa later on in the book of Deuteronomy, where someone is killed in the middle. Right? We talked about Rabbi Kovacs has talked about this during the summer. Right? Like the unknown death, who murdered him. It's kind of like a quality here of, like, like a mystery. Vayikra Yaakov simlotav vayasam sak b'motnav vaytabel b'no yamim rabim. And now Jacob will tear his garment and place a mourning cloth and mourn for his son all of these days.
So,
and they try to vayakumu kol banav v'chobonotav l'nachamo, and all of them, they try to comfort him. All of his family tries to comfort his children. It doesn't. This is also the first time it says binotav, his daughters, and they comfort him, but he refuses to be comforted, and says, "Ki ered el beni avel sheola." I will also go down to hell or to Sheol with my son. Vayev oto aviv, and his father cries for him.
so
Yeah.
this is an extremely exciting story, and I may be overreaching when I think that it's just that all of Genesis builds up to teaching people from the beginning what is important in life, what to do, what not to do, on a very basic level. What's more basic than teaching your kids to welcome the new baby, and not to, and to be very careful with a little gevura and a lot of love, and the balance of the two, and so on. And there are things that allude maybe to some of the sefirot here. I don't remember exactly where, but that's how I see it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a deep story. There are a lot of sirot in here, and there's a lot of Kabbalah. And certainly the text is telling us, this becomes, the sale of Joseph becomes one of the most important tropes in later anti-Semitic behavior.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, the Romans apparently in the story of the martyrology of Yom Kippur came to the Jews and said, you sold your brother into slavery, and he wasn't paid back, we're going to pay you back. And so there's a lot around the sale of Joseph as a sin that was never completely requited. And certainly it's it ends well. We all know that it ends well, but it's a horrible story to read because it's never ended. It's constantly, it's a story that happens all the time. It's not a new story on any sense. And it's not a resolved story. It's a continual problem. I don't actually think the Joseph narrative finishes until Moses. I think Moses is the completion of the Joseph narrative. Yeah.